Very good afternoon, everybody. Uh, Greetings from the Holy City. I'm Dr. Gurinder Mohan. I'm Professor and Head Medicine at Shri Guru Ramdas University of Health Sciences, Amritsar. First of all, I must thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to speak before this august audience. For the next few minutes, I will be discussing a topic which is we are daily coming across in our day-to-day clinical practice, that is thyroid-associated orbitopathy or TAU. So to understand, let us have a look at this case scenario. So a 60-year-old patient presented with history of weight loss, palpitation, and tremors for the last 6 months, with protrusion of both his eyes associated with retrobulbar pain and redness of both eyes. There was no history of diplopia or visual loss. He denied any history of smoking. On examination, his heart rate was 128 per minute. Blood pressure was 140 by 60 millimeter of mercury. He had diffuse soft grade 1 goiter and proptosis of 24 millimeter present in both eyes with marked chemosis and swelling of eyelids. His ocular movements, they were restricted in all the quadrants bilaterally. Normal visual acuity, color vision, and no papillar edema was there. And his pupillary reflexes were normal. So this picture is almost fitting into a patient who is having thyrotoxicosis with eye involvement. This is the picture who fits into a patient of thyroid-associated orbitopathy. So what is this thyroid-associated orbitopathy or TAU? So this is an autoimmune disorder characterized by immunoinflammation of extraocular muscles and retroorbital tissues, which invariably occurs in presence of autoimmune thyroid disease, which may be hyperthyroidism, hyper, or even euthyroidism also. 90% of patients with TAU, they have got hyperthyroidism, and this is most common cause is Graves' disease. 6 to 10% of patient may be euthyroid, while 3 to 4% patient may be having hypothyroidism in the form of Hashimoto thyroiditis. So is thyroid-associated orbitopathy and Graves' orbitopathy are one and the same thing? Although the terms are used synonymously, they are not the same, because thyroid-associated orbitopathy is eye involvement with autoimmune thyroid disease in any form, maybe hyper or maybe hypothyroidism. But Graves' orbitopathy is term which is limited for usage in eye involvement in presence of only Graves' disease. So that is TAU with hyperthyroidism is Graves' orbitopathy, and it is moderate to severe. It is bilateral and symmetrical, while TAU with hypothyroidism is milder and asymmetrical. So do all patients with thyrotoxicosis they develop eye involvement? There are risk factors. No, it is not like that. There are risk factors for such patients like old age, male sex, severe thyrotoxicosis at presentation, large goiter, persistent elevation of thyroid receptor antibodies, smoking, which is a major risk factor, the use of radioiodine and drugs like pioglitazone, which may worsen TAU due to orbital adipocyte proliferation. If we talk about the epidemiology, so clinically evident orbitopathy, this is seen in about 1/3 of patients with Graves' disease. While sight-threatening orbitopathy, it occurs in 3 to 5% of patients only. So like Graves' disease, which is more common in females in a ratio of 10:1, female to male ratio of 10:1. Graves' orbitopathy is limited in the form that female to male ratio is 2:1. And it is usually bilateral, but can be asymmetrical in 10 to 15%. And it is rarely unilateral. This Graves' orbitopathy, it may precede, accompany, or follow the hyperthyroidism. Like it is because of differential responsiveness of orbital fibroblasts and follicular cells and variability in the number of TSH receptors over the follicular cells and over the thyroid, this orbital fibroblasts. So most common muscles which are affected, they are inferior and medial rectus, and muscle belly is involved with sparing of tendons is there. If we talk about the natural history, so there is an initial active phase of 6 to 12 months, followed by a plateau phase for 1 to 3 months, and then an inactive phase which lasts for 1 to 2 years. So what is the pathogenesis? How does this tau develops? So the TSH receptors, they are present on the orbital fibroblast. So this is an extrathyroidal manifestations. Like TSH receptors, they are present in the eye. They are present on the extraocular muscles, adipocytes, dermal fibroblasts, and orbital fibroblasts. So antibodies which are present, thyroid TSH receptor antibodies which are present in the circulation, they cross react with the with the receptors present in the eye. So they stimulate, these stimulate or activate the T cells, which further stimulates or activate the retroorbital fibroblasts and adipocyte deposition, and hence retroorbital inflammation. So what does this lead on to? So this lead on to deposition of glycosaminoglycans or hyaluronic acid. So there is accumulation of the fluid, muscle swelling is there, increase in the orbital pressure is there, and there is retroorbital adipogenesis. There is displacement which leads on to displacement of eyeball forward, that is exophthalmos. There is extraocular muscle dysfunction, and hence impaired venous drainage occurs. So how does the patient presents? So what are the clinical symptomatology? None of the symptoms are specific for tau. Most of the patients, some of the patient rather they present with vague, atypical symptoms like gritty or foreign body sensation in the eyes. There can be excessive tearing, which is worsening on exposure to cold air, wind, or even bright lights. There is retroorbital pain. There is blurring of vision. Patient can complain of diplopia, or color vision can be impaired, or in severe cases, there can be loss of vision. And when we examine, the most consistent finding is the exophthalmos or proptosis, that is forward protrusion of the eyeball. This is a measure of the position of cornea in relation to the lateral margin of the orbit. So degree of protrusion of eyeball, it depends upon the age. It varies from gender, ethnicity, extent of myopia, and method used for testing. Normally, in Asian population, we consider 17 millimeter as a normal cutoff limit, and more than 20 millimeter is considered as moderate to severe proptosis. There is periorbital edema, there is conjunctival congestion, there is lid congestion, there is marked chemosis. So these are the signs which need to be looked for. These are the signs which we used to study in our MBBS classes also, like von Graefe sign, lid lag, lid retraction, Dalrymple sign, Stellwag sign, Geoffroy sign, loss of forehead wrinkling, Rosenbach sign, Cocker sign, and Moebius sign. These are the simple signs which can be looked for in our clinical examination. So there is a term called as the frozen globe. So frozen globe is the restriction of movement of eyeball in all the quadrants due to ocular cranial nerve involvement. But in tau, frozen globe is because of as such due to inflammation and involvement of the extraocular muscles and not any cranial nerve palsy. Ptosis is uncommon in Graves' disease. This is because of, if it occurs, is because of involvement of the levator palpebrae superioris muscle or Mueller's muscle. Then the severest form is vision loss. So vision loss in tau is because of two factors. One is exposure keratitis with severe corneal involvement, and second thing is dysthyroid or optic neuropathy or the dawn. This is because of stretching and compression of the optic nerve, either due to severe proptosis or even subluxation of the globe. There is crowding of the extraocular muscles and fibroblasts in the orbit, which leads on to compression of the optic nerve at the orbital apex. This is called as orbital apex syndrome. So what happens in dawn? Dysthyroid optic neuropathy, there is decrease in the visual acuity, color vision is lost, visual field defects occur, there occurs papilledema, there is relative afferent pupillary defect, and apical crowding is seen on imaging. Now, how to diagnose? So the diagnosis is based upon basically three avenues. One is ocular sign and symptom, another is thyroid autoimmunity, and third is orbital imaging. So the clinical sign and symptoms, this is based upon two scoring systems. One is clinical activity score and another is severity score. So the clinical activity score, it takes into account three symptoms and signs like pain, redness, and swelling. So pain is spontaneous retrobulbar pain, one score. Pain on gaze, upward, downward, and side gaze, one score. Redness of cornea, redness of conjunctiva, and redness of eyelid. Each is given one score. And third is swelling, in which swelling of eyelids is checked, swelling of caruncle and or plica, and third is chemosis. Again, each is given one score. So total of 7 score is there. And the clinical activity score of equal to or more than 3, this is considered to be clinically active. More than 3 is clinically active disease. And another scoring system is severity score. It uses the mnemonics no specs, and N stands for no signs and symptoms. O is only signs, no symptom. S is soft tissue involvement. P is for proptosis. E is extraocular muscle involvement. C for corneal involvement. And S for sight loss due to optic nerve involvement. So from depending upon or based upon these 6 parameters, this is divided, or Graves orbitopathy or tau is divided into 3 categories: mild, moderate to severe, and very severe or sight threatening. So what is seen in mild grade? So mild tau is like lid retraction is there, less than 2 millimeter. Mild soft tissue involvement, proptosis less than 3 millimeter, transient or absent diplopia, and no corneal exposure, no optic nerve involvement. In moderate to severe, this is more than 2 millimeter lid retraction is there. Moderate to severe soft tissue involvement is there. More than 3 millimeter proptosis is there. Constant or inconstant diplopia is there. Corneal exposure mild in the form of punctate keratopathy is there, and optic nerve status is normal. While in sight threatening, there is severe corneal involvement with compression of the optic nerve in the form of DON, this thyroid optic neuropathy. Second parameter for diagnosis which we use is thyroid autoimmunity. As we have already discussed, autoimmune disease is mandatory for the development of tau. So 3 types of antibodies need to be checked, like thyroid stimulating receptor antibodies, thyroid stimulating hormone receptor antibodies, then anti-TPO antibodies and anti-thyroglobulin antibodies. These are the 3 antibodies which need to be checked apart from routine investigation like thyroid hormone levels, T3, T4, TSH, thyroid ultrasound, and thyroid scintigraphy. Then orbital imaging, various modalities like ultrasound is available, CT and MRI, they are available. So indications for orbital imaging, they are unilateral proptosis, asymmetrical proptosis, clinically suspected DON, euthyroid or hypothyroid orbitopathy, tau associated with ptosis, and when we want to rule out granulomatous disease like orbital tumors. So what are the findings on imaging? Like we will look for proptosis. There will be thickening of extraocular muscles that is more than 5 millimeter with sparing of tendons. Coca-Cola bottle sign. This is called as Coca-Cola bottle sign. There will be increase in the retroorbital fat, intracranial fat prolapse will be there, and apical crowding can be there. So inferior and medial rectus are the most common muscle to be affected, although any muscle can be involved. So this picture shows thickened extraocular muscles. Before confirming, other differential diagnosis should be kept in mind, like endocrinal and non-endocrinal causes of ptosis should be ruled out, like Cushing syndrome, acromegaly, obesity, and primary hyperparathyroidism among the chief endocrinal causes. And among the non-endocrinal, cavernous sinus thrombosis and carotico-cavernous fistula, orbital myositis, orbital tumor, granulomatous infiltration of orbit, they need to be ruled out before labeling that patient is actually having tau. So taking up the management part. So a multidisciplinary approach is required, all the patients, they must be referred to thyroid, specialized thyroid eye clinics. And this is done at the level of 3 steps. First is general measures, second is treatment for the thyroid status, and third is treatment for the eye. Local measures, they need to be adopted, like simple local measures like artificial tears, which need to protect the epithelium and dryness which is occurring in such patient. Sunglasses which will help to protect the photophobia. Lubricant ointments for protection from this exposure keratopathy while sleeping. Prisms will help to decrease the diplopia, and botulinum toxin injections for lid retraction. Like raising the head end of bed, smoking cessation is one step which must be urged in all the patients. There is Graves orbitopathy quality of life questionnaire, which must be maintained in each and every patient. Then taking up the thyroid treatment. So euthyroidism must be promptly restored and maintained in each and every patient. And it is to be preferably done by anti-thyroid drugs or thyroidectomy. Radioiodine is to be avoided as it can worsen the Graves orbitopathy. If at all we are to use this radioactive iodine, prophylactic steroids, they need to be started along with for 3 months at least. Oral prednisone 0.3 to 0.5 milligram per kilogram for 3 months is given, particularly in patients who are smokers. Active Graves orbitopathy is there, and in whom high TSH receptor antibody levels are there. So the eye treatment, it depends upon clinical activity score and severity score. For mild tau, which we have classified earlier, local measures they are to be adopted. Selenium is to be used, 100 microgram BD for 6 months. Sodium selenate is used. It has got anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effect, and no immunosuppressive therapy is required at this stage, mild class. And for moderate to severe tau, which is active, clinically active, moderate to severe means severity, clinical activity score is more than 3 out of 7. And immunosuppressive therapy is the hallmark cornerstone of management for this moderate to severe patients. And IV methylprednisolone, first line treatment are the steroids in the form of IV methylprednisolone pulse therapy. So dose which we use is 500 milligram IV once a week for 6 weeks, followed by 250 milligram once a week for 6 weeks, and cumulative doses 4.5 gram. For severe cases, 750 milligram once a week for 6 weeks, followed by 500 milligram once a week for 6 weeks, for a cumulative dose of 7.5 gram is used. But in no case the cumulative dose should exceed 8 grams. This therapy, this efficacy of IV methylprednisolone can be enhanced by co-administration of mycophenolate 360 milligram twice a day for 6 months. Contraindications like fulminant hepatic failure can occur, significant cardiovascular morbidity can occur, uncontrolled diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma are the other contraindications for steroids. Then second line therapy for patients, indications who are steroid non-responders, who are partial responders, or who get a flare after discontinuation of IV methylprednisolone. Such patients, they should be started with other agents in the form of low dose oral prednisolone plus either cyclosporin or retrobulbar irradiation, usually 20 gray fractioned in 10 daily doses of 2 gray over a 2-week period is given. Then we can repeat IV methylprednisolone also, or rituximab can be used. Rituximab is anti-CD20 monoclonal antibody. Two doses are given, 1 gram IV on day 1 and day 15. So another newer drug is teprotumumab. So this is IGF-1 receptor inhibitor. So dose every 3 weeks IV infusion is given. First is 10 milligram per kilogram initial dose, followed by 20 milligram per kilogram for total of 8 infusions are given. It is highly effective in reducing clinical activity score, reducing the exophthalmos, and improving the diplopia and Graves orbitopathy quality of life scores. Mycophenolate, Mofetil, we have discussed 500 BD for 24 weeks it is used. This is inhibitor of purine synthesis. Then tocilizumab, IL-6 inhibitor, doses 4 to 8 milligram per kilogram IV at 0, 4, 8 and 12 weeks it is given. Other options, newer drugs like azathioprine, etanercept, somatostatin analogs, they are also being tried but yet not proved. Now, there is another clinically inactive, that is clinical activity score less than 3, but moderate to severe tau. So CAS less than 3, no role of immunosuppressive agents. Steroids are not helpful. They require decompressive or rehabilitative surgery. So rehabilitative surgery, it includes orbital decompression, then eye muscle surgery and eyelid surgery in order of frequency. Then severe tau, like sight-threatening tau. So like patients who are having dysthyroid optic neuropathy, they require urgent intervention. Now high-dose corticosteroid pulse, IV methylprednisolone, 1 gram IV on 3 consecutive days in first week, followed by 1 gram IV on 3 consecutive days in second week is used. And if visual function improve by the end of second week, continue with oral prednisolone. And if not, then urgent surgical decompression is indicated. So one of the indication for urgent surgical decompression is sight-threatening tau or DON. Then what is the role of orbital radiotherapy? So this is most effective in recent onset active disease who have got diplopia or restricted eye mobility is there. External beam radiation is given which suppresses intraorbital T lymphocytes. So indications for radiotherapy are patients who are in whom steroids cannot be used, who are steroid intolerant, or even adjunct to glucocorticoids can be used. Patient having clinically active disease should be prerequisite for this. Dose we have already discussed, 10 to 20 gray in each orbit is given, focused on the retroorbital tissues and delivered in 10 fractions over a period of say 2 weeks. Contraindications for orbital radiotherapy are patient less than 35 years of age, diabetic and hypertensive retinopathy patients. Then what about the orbital decompressions? So indications are DON, we have discussed already, dysthyroid optic neuropathy, corneal breakdown, globe subluxation, not responding to methylprednisolone for 1 to 2 weeks, active disease, intolerant or non-responsive to glucocorticoids. Then inactive disease, disfiguring exophthalmos for cosmetic reason. This is another indication for orbital decompression. Other surgical options like squint correction, fat decompression surgery, these are basically for cosmetic reason. Eyelid surgery like lid lengthening, blepharoplasty and broplasty, they are used. So in order of frequency, orbital decompression should be followed by squint surgery, and then it should be followed by eyelid surgery, which is last of all. But again, the disease should be consistently inactive for at least 6 months. Otherwise, the surgical results will be lost because the disease is still active. So this is to summarize that, like the management part for all the patients with Graves' orbitopathy, like we have to restore the euthyroidism, urge smoking cessation, local measures to be achieved, adopted, refer to specialist except for mildest cases. So mild, wait and see. We can use selenium. Once the patient is stable and inactive, rehabilitative surgery. If IV glucocorticoids can be used if quality of life is severely impaired. Then moderate to severe, again, active or non-active. Active, use IV glucocorticoids pulse. Stable and inactive, once it is there, then rehabilitative surgery. And for inactive, we know it is rehabilitative surgery. And for sight-threatening DON, IV glucocorticoids are used. Once patient becomes inactive, then rehabilitative surgery. If patient is not responding, poor response after 2 weeks, then prompt decompression is done. And if patient is still active, again, IV glucocorticoids can be used. And once it becomes inactive, then rehabilitative surgery should be done. So to summarize, so this tau, thyroid-associated orbitopathy, is a disease which can lead to marked limitation of the daily activity and vision loss. severity score, and clinical activity score. They guide to early diagnosis and management of the patients. IV methylprednisolone is the treatment of choice in active, moderate to severe disease. Neo drugs, which are potentially helpful, they are teprotumumab and rituximab, which are showing good results in steroid-resistant patients. Rehabilitative or reconstructive surgery for inactive, moderate to severe diseases is recommended. That's all. Thank you.